Hi everyone, Happy New Year. It's 2018 already. If you've been following our conversations, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and do stick around for more in the months to come. And yes, you're tuned into Safe Space, where life questions are talked about from theological perspectives, and my name is Debbie, your host for this month's episode. How dangerous is head knowledge? If knowledge puffs up, should we just ignore it altogether? And if Greek philosophy was considered so contrary to the cross, how did it come to shape Christian theology as we know it today? Join me as I speak to Christian thinker and columnist Dr. Alwyn Lau for a conversation on his columns, the cross, and how Greek philosophy, or in his words, pagan philosophy, has shaped Christian theology. Dr. Alwyn Lau is best known for his column in the Malay Mail Online, where he comments and even critiques life and culture in urban Malaysia and all the trappings of modern living, such as consumerism and even the drive to perform, among other matters. He challenges the practices of urban lifestyle that we have taken as normal and questions the why of what we do. Dr. Alwyn Lau has a bachelor's degree of divinity from the University of London and more recently completed his PhD in political philosophy. His areas of interests include philosophical theology, Malaysian studies, religion, and apologetics. Check this out. Okay, we are on.
Okay, great. Great.
Hi, Alwyn. Thank you so much for coming and spending this time with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you are a columnist for Malay Mail Online.
That's right.
And awesome articles
Thanks.
On life, I think. But how would you describe your column?
Well, first of all, to be very honest, it's just really a moonlighting gig. I don't earn a lot of money, so I can't help me get some money. But other than that, it's a way to express three areas of my thought: education, politics, religion, and a bit of philosophy. So it's kind of like 3.5 areas. It's a way of trying to test out some ideas with the Malaysian news portal reading population. And I know it will be safe, because if it's not safe, my editor will just knock it out. So well, that's the purpose of the column.
How do you choose what you want to write about?
That is a good question. I often, well, there are multiple ways. Sometimes I'm reading a book, like for example, I mean the one that came out today is on exchange value and use value, and the only reason I wrote about that was because on Friday I was reading something about Freud, and he was talking about exchange value versus use value, and on the spot I decided to write about exchange value and use value. Other times I read about, let's say, a pertinent issue like, you know, road rages are fighting in the streets. You know, suddenly I said, oh, let's write about that. Very rarely I get a very nicely placed kind of like open shot. It's a chance to talk about Christian doctrine in public life. So, for example, the most popular one I think was Zakir Naik and Christian doctrine of Trinity. It just so happened that my friend Joshua posted something about his views. I mean, Zakir Naik's views on the Trinity, and I thought, hey, you know, when I read Zakir Naik's views, I thought, hey, this is a chance to explain to kind of like the Malaysian community about the Trinity. So yeah. It's not enough, the sources, the inspiration, so and so. Yeah. So
you're basically a Christian voice in the public sphere, so to speak.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'd like to be a Christian voice, but to be honest, it's not my primary thing. I think if you do a statistical count of my articles, probably 30% would be on Christian doctrine, and yeah, there will be another 40% will be on education, and the other 30% will be mix of religion and so forth.
I particularly like a particular category of your writings that talk about slowing down and also challenging this tendency for us to want to be achievers, and to just strive, Just very quickly, what are your thoughts about
that slowing down part?
Yeah, the slowing down part.
Yeah, one of the big problems I think in Malaysian community is this thing of what I like to call success porn. Success porn, which is the message that we're bombarded every day. Especially you go on LinkedIn and Facebook, you see many memes and so on and so forth. Is it memes or memes? I don't know. Memes. Okay. Where you got to do, achieve, work, earn, and so I think since we're talking about Christianity, I think that fits in very well in line with what Jesus is talking about. You can't serve two masters. Either God or mammon. And I think success porn, or this whole achievement mentality, is today's manifestation of this mammon worship. And so I like to take pot shot at that, and especially we are in an Asian community with all our use of Chinese so I think it's worth talking about, especially with growing rate of student suicides and mental health and things like that. Yeah.
And that leads nicely on about how your public persona, your packaging tends to be, rough and tough. You as a Christian, you don't shy away from saying things like success porn, right? And then it's kind of like, wow, we have a Christian, and maybe for myself, So is that who you are, or is that a tone that you choose to use, to convey your message? Yeah,
that's who I am when I teach. That's who I like to be when I'm facilitating workshops and training. And that's who I like to be when I'm writing, because the weird thing about me is that I would rather you say my article was terrible than you saying that my article was boring. So I've got this paranoia about being boring. I don't know, maybe it's my own head issue or something there. So hence my frequent use of say non-conventional terms and stuff like that. Maybe another source of this thing is because I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy and Robin Williams and all these people, and so I spend hours just watching them, and so I suppose it gets into me, how every line has to be different, and I really hate it if someone were to tell me that when he read the first paragraph, he knew what I was going to write in the second paragraph. So that's the stuff that I'm trying to avoid. The whole, I'm trying to shake things up, so to speak. Yeah, that's me.
Okay, great. So we're going to go straight into our chat now. So when it comes to thinking, and you do a lot of reflection, but also a lot of thinking, a lot of people call as being intellectual in that sense. So I think in many Christian circles, sometimes we are taught that head knowledge can be dangerous, if we are being a bit too intellectual, and can be dangerous to our spirituality, as opposed to heart knowledge. So there seems to be a kind of like dichotomy. But I always ask, really, can the head really be, separated from the heart? How do you think about the use of our heads in our?
I was just doing a piece on divorce and remarriage, and the famous phrase, "What God has put together, let no man break asunder." So I think heart and head has been put together by God, and so I think they should be together. I think what the proper Christian objection towards head knowledge per se is when the head knowledge is divorced from faith, when the head knowledge is presented as proud, cocky, know-it-all, like a Big Bang Theory, Sheldon Cooper kind of thing. Oh, I know everything. So that is worth, that kind of head knowledge for the head knowledge sake is worth rebuking. But of course, as in most things in life, that we tend to go to the opposite extreme, which is we give the impression that therefore all you need is heart knowledge, which is not true. Obviously, I think people like Paul, for example, and Jesus, of course, were incredibly smart. And what we need to do is to recover a very, what I call, I think anti-right, and some people call it chastened rationality. So it's rational, it's strong, it's, it's very intellectual, it's very even argumentative, but it's chastened. I mean, it's not runaway rationality. It's warm rationality, and it's very open-hearted. So definitely, I mean, the long and short of it is that Christians still need to think, and of course we still need to read, we need to analyze, we need to study, but we do so in the spirit of humility and openness. Yep.
So, do you think that this kind of warning actually shuts out those who do want intellectual engagement?
Right.
Or do you think everybody should be involved in this kind of engagement?
Okay, I'll answer the second. I don't think everyone should be involved. But maybe let me deal with that by talking about the first. I think it will not shut out people who are really keen. In fact, I think this, this positive intellectualism is a little bit like desire. If you shut it out, if you repress it, the more it will grow. And I think you take the average, kid in church who's got a lot of questions and a lot of intelligent thoughts, and if you tell him to keep quiet and don't do that, he's not going to do it. I mean, he's not going to obey you. He's probably going to continue thinking, continue talking, continue arguing, and worst comes to worst, he'll do it in another church. So that's my quick answer. Now the second, what was the second question again? Do I think everybody, right?
Yeah. Do you think everybody should be encouraged to sort of pursue a more...
Okay, I would, simple answer would be no. I think everyone, for example, if let's say Ron Chung comes to PJEFC, and that was the last time I was here, by the way, I think sure, we should open it to everyone. No one should say you should not attend Ron Chung's seminar. But having said that, I personally don't think that everyone has the aptitude, the acumen of going deeper. And the reason why I said it is just like for example, not everyone can be an outdoors person.
Yeah.
Not everyone can climb Mount Kinabalu. Not everyone can be a missionary to Mongolia and all that kind of thing. Because I think there's some innate gifts and community issues and okay, just a quick. I understand why some Christians may object to intellectual knowledge, because maybe perhaps in the past they have been what's the word? They have been bitten or they have been burned.
Yeah. Because
sometimes, in fact all the time, if I as an argumentative person really just kind of like do cognitive violence upon you or violence upon someone that I disagree with, that could really turn off that person, and that person may reject may reject theology, reject doctrine, because I committed violence upon him. So again, I would say the people who should go into these kinds of, for lack of a better word, cognitive or intellectual ministry should be people who are prepared enough or have the acumen, the aptitude to be able to deal with cognitive violence. Because when you start arguing with some people, don't even have to be atheists, can be fellow Christians as well, there will be a lot of what's the word, pushbacks. There will be a lot of even harshness and some mockery as well. So not everyone can deal with that. Yep.
So I think when I asked you to have to come in and have this conversation, I wanted to talk about 1 Corinthians 1,
right.
18 to 31, which
Sure.
is people commonly use to say, look, let's not think too much lah,
Yeah.
And I'll read, for the word of the cross is folly to
Right.
those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Who is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what to be preached to save those who believe. So has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? What does this actually mean in Paul's context? Like, what was he talking about, this wisdom of the world, and why did it was kind of like, what was Paul saying?
All right. not a Pauline scholar, but my understanding of that passage is basically Paul is just really, really passionate and upset about the fact that his flock, his church, is constantly being berated by all these, attackers of Christianity, the skeptics who use Greek philosophy, and of course that's one angle. Sorry, that's one invasion. The other invasion was from the Jews. So you had the Jewish people were saying that you guys are fake Messiah, blah blah blah, and the Greek people are saying that you guys are stupid or something. So I think Paul, it was like he was just pretty bit cheesed off, and so he grabbed onto the one thing that we should all grab on, which is the cross. Because the cross, what was it? Foolishness to Greeks and something, right? So something about the Jews. The cross is the one thing that really cheeses off philosophers and thinkers who don't believe. It just goes against everything, goes against the spirit. In fact, you don't even have to look far. The cross even takes off Christians as well, in politics especially. So there's just something about the cross which goes against human nature, almost like that. And part of human nature is, of course, human philosophizing and humans' attacks. So now, quick excursus. I don't believe that verse is Paul saying to Christians that you should never, ever read philosophy and stuff. I don't believe that that's what Paul is saying. Paul is saying he's applying the cross to a very specific attacks against the faith. And yeah, fair enough. Every time people imply that, I think there's a Cantonese phrase, 講耶穌, talking Jesus is talking nonsense and talking, whatever. Those are the instances where that passage would apply. You know what? And Paul was saying, yeah, in the worldly sense, you guys are smart, you always think that Jesus is stupid, blah, blah, blah. But in the Christological sense, or what's the word, the cruciform sense, no. It is an entirely different ball game, right? The cross really shows you a different reality than what you guys are used to. So, again, to repeat, I don't think that passage is a passage against head knowledge. I believe that passage must be read in the context of Paul's throwbacks against his opponents. Yeah.
Just to just this little diversion.
Sure.
It's kind of like you mentioned and you pointed out that the cross is foolishness, is folly, and the Greek philosophers would be like, "What? This is stupid." I'm like, "How can you believe such a thing?" But yet today, Christians are busy trying to prove that the Christian faith is superior. Do you think it's ironic that we are trying to contest with the other kinds of worldviews around us when actually it's found to be folly? So here we are, trying to be bigger and better.
Well, the quick statement would be that I think it's fine for Christians to try to persuade other people that Christianity is true, that resurrection happened, and so on and so forth. I think that's part and parcel of evangelism. In fact, to persuade, and to persuade usually involves argument, and argument is thinking and stuff like that. So persuasion means you need to have some kind of head knowledge there. Then again, fair enough. The folly, I think, is a matter of believing that it's folly to try to beat the world at its own game. So it's folly, I think, if you try to, I'm going to use all the assets and all the arsenal of the world, all the values and all the, what do you call this, all the tricks and techniques of the world, in order to prove to the world that my faith is the one. And of course, if I don't win, I get upset, And I think that's what Paul is getting at. Don't try to beat the world at its own game. You present your case, and you do so with patience, and God will honor your efforts. But again, don't go and don't go and deny the value of thinking and so on and so forth. Yep.
Okay. So I'd like to discuss with you about that Christian theology over the ages
Right.
has been shaped by Western philosophers,
Right, yeah.
such as Plato and Aristotle. I think it was Augustine who took after Plato,
Right.
and Aquinas who took after Aristotle.
Probably, yeah.
How can you share about that story?
Yeah. All right. Definitely, modern Christian theology is, in some sense, beholden to the Greek philosophy. Our very idea of a perfect God comes from that. Now here, of course, we're going to get into a little bit of, you know, controversy, because guys like me, for example, I don't know if I can say it. I actually don't believe in the Greek perspective of perfection and changelessness. So that's one axiom, the fact that the Greeks connected perfection with changelessness.
Yeah.
Right, and that, in my view, creates a lot of problems. The reason being, it causes Christians to have conception of God, a preconception of God, prior to going to the Bible. So they would read the Bible's view of God, of Jesus and so on and so forth, of God's passions and God's plans, and control it using a Greek frame of mind, which is, so for example, anytime you read a passage about God changing his mind, immediately the knee-jerk reaction, no, God is a perfect being, he cannot change his mind, so therefore you would just change the Bible meaning, you know, from its original verse. So that's
so you're saying that the Greek idea of
Yeah.
perfection is of God is one who is perfect, who does not change.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
what would be maybe the Jewish way of that's different from?
Sure. Well, okay. I'm probably, if I could say what I would claim is the biblical way,
Yeah.
is that if you read the minor prophets, major prophets, I mean, you follow the whole narrative of Old Testament, you see that God is a person in time. God is a person who emotes. God, I mean, to be very blunt, God changes his mind. You know, God asks what if, you know, God might, you know. So what I'm trying to say is I think we need to recover that aspect of God being a person with all the, you know, with all the experiences of a person, the before and after. And for example, instead of saying that God is timeless, what the Bible says God is eternal, and what theologian Clark Pinnock said is that God is a being who perfectly experiences time. So, and I love this rethinking, this whole exercise in reimagination, because it forces me to really come to grips with the picture that the Bible presents. If I know, and I think more Christians should know, if I know that many Christians and many theologians' view of God has been shaped and locked in by Greek philosophy, and to use a very crude word, by pagan philosophy, then I know that, hey, you know, I can read the Bible in a fresh light to put off all these, you know, all these shackles of pagan philosophy. Right?
Yeah, I think what you said is, I just read, I love Walter Brueggemann,
Right, yeah.
and he talks about how the whole idea, and again this is potentially controversial, the whole idea of God being the three omnis.
Right.
He is always all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present.
Right.
But he kind of says, but look, the Old Testament expresses God in such a way where he uses the term dialogical,
Right.
whereby it's kind of like
Give and
he
take,
is
yep.
always in relation to
Yep,
someone,
yep, yep,
and
yep.
it's always a relationship, and that kind of ties into what you mentioned about
Right.
changing, you know,
Right.
changing his mind, changing and there's a very internal complexity in God,
Yeah, that's right.
whereby he struggles through things, he feels strongly,
He feels pain.
yeah, he reflects, he thinks before he makes a decision.
That's right. And he plans, you know.
Yeah.
Now, actually, on that score, you see, if you really are consistent with the Greek philosophy, you come to this thing called the impassibility of God. In other words, a God who cannot suffer. And I still confess that I'm quite shocked that there are actually many theologians who actually believe that. so on one hand, you actually believe that Jesus is God, Jesus died and suffered on the cross, but at the back of your mind, you believe in this thing called the impassibility of God, the impassible God, the God who does not suffer. Because strictly speaking, again, if God is a perfect being, he never changes, then how can you say that he suffers? It doesn't make sense as I see it, and yeah, so, and I think that if Christians continue to let's just believe it anyway, that kind of makes us less persuasive in the public square, because people will kind of ask, hey, but isn't that a contradiction? And then, oh yeah. So I think Christians have to rethink that notion.
Why do you think it's important? Like, the question I'm asking now is, what is the difference between someone who believes in the Greek way, so to speak, and someone who believes in the other way that you mentioned?
Right. Well, the first criterion is, of course, the criterion of truth, right? Jesus says, I'm the way, truth, and the life. So at the end of the day, you don't have to be ashamed or afraid if you're approaching the issue of truth. So to me, the first thing is, if the Greek way is, can I say, false or less true, then, and the biblical one is true, then you should have no shame moving to the biblical one. And truth is not neutral, abstract truth with no impact. I mean, as we all know, you cannot consistently believe in something that's not true and so-called get away with it. The truth is always tied to character, right? So the first answer would be, yeah, I would choose to challenge traditional theology if I think that it's wedded to a pagan philosophy, and the reason I would do that is because I believe that is not the truth, and you should be proud of presenting the truth as we know it.
Okay, so what we discussed here is pretty big.
Oh yeah, it's very.
So how would we now read people like Augustine and read people, those fathers of the faith, so-called, of the early church, who have interpreted the biblical text in that way now?
Yeah, all right, now we're going to get a bit of history here. I'm not fully sure, but I believe that prior to Augustine, this whole Greek stuff wasn't as entrenched. In other words, I don't think that the early church fathers, prior to Augustine, believed in this Greek stuff that we talked about. I believe they, again, if you could ask them or meet them, they probably didn't have that kind of view. But Augustine was the first guy who really made it popular, and just like Constantine was the first person that brought Christ into government. So Augustine was, you could say, the first person that brought Greek categories really smack into the nature of God and all that kind of stuff. Well, having said that, I think that love is patient, love is kind, and so we need to be kind to our forefathers, and we we recognize that everyone is limited in his own time, and yeah, so we don't judge them, yeah.
Certainly, again, if we were to step out of that and to look at it from afar,
right.
Certainly there are ways whereby we read the Bible with our own biases. I mean it in the sense that we have our own questions,
sure.
And then the question of God being those things, unchanging and things like that.
Right.
And I suppose these were the biases that they read. So they read God into their own biases and their own questions.
Okay. Right. Probably.
What is the validity of us doing that if we are to say that, look, we want to read the Bible to answer some question, let's say from an Asian point of view or Eastern point of view.
Okay.
Could we read the Bible, let's say, whether on purpose or accidentally, from a Confucian point of view?
Oh, wow. Okay, I think the straightforward answer is yes. I think there's one book called Models of Contextual Theology by Stephen Bevan or something like that. Now, the position I would start out with is the fact that all of us are located somewhere, and we wake up in what you call a paradigm community. So we have no choice but to read the Bible and come to God with the question that we have. And I think God, being God, affirms that we have these questions and stuff like that. Now, if you remember, I think what you said about Walter Brueggemann about how God's nature is dialogical. Now there's another word for it, it's called dialectical, which you could say that absolute truth is dialectical. So whether it's 1500 or 2017, the absolute truth of God is in continual relationship and dialogue with the people, whether it's 1500 Europe or 2017 Malaysia. So God meets us where we are. Now that doesn't mean that it's good, it's okay to embrace falsehood or whatever it is. It just means that we have certain modes of thinking. Now from here we can go on to the Asian theology. Asian theologies have a different priority. If I could just put it that way. They in a way, Asians seem to be more accepting of, say, you know, Asian theology is less dichotomous, more open, more relational. Now, this is not like, and I think what this shows is the emphasis. All right, so Asian theology has an emphasis, has a certain style. Western theology has a certain emphasis, a certain style. And of course, the questions are, of course, you know, like for example, right now, how do you bring the, you know, how do you analyze the Rohingya situation in the Bible, stuff like that. So some is a circumstance as well. All right. So just to tie it back together, I think one, God meets us where we are, and Asian theology is part of where we are. All right. And I believe God affirms that. Having said that, it doesn't mean that therefore anything goes. That's why you have a dialogue, right? That's why you dialogue. If it's just one way, then you have this very parochial kind of doctrine. If it's like God to you, but if it's you to God, then that's very humanistic. I think it's that dialogical thing, all right? So even if I have an Asian theology with me, if I have Asian way of thinking, I can still be corrected by the Bible, and I can still read the Bible in a different way from how Western people read it, right? So that's how I view it.
Wow. Okay, going back to what we started off saying regarding philosophy and faith.
Sure.
You introduced me to a book, Christianity and Philosophy.
Right.
We had a short discussion about it.
Right.
How do we marry? How is the relationship between philosophy and Christianity?
Okay. First quick comment is that book is a Western theology book. So you see, that book itself brackets out Asian philosophy already. So that book is purely Western philosophy and so on. So your question was, how do we marry philosophy and faith, right? Wow, okay. Again, what I would use is, I call it the inverted U curve. You know, the inverted U curve. What it means is that philosophy and faith, there are some value, there's benefit. But there can come a point where philosophy goes against the faith. So we need to live within the value part. So, okay, so to quickly answer, what is the value of philosophy to the faith? Because when you talk about marrying, there must be some value, right, obviously. One quick answer would be that I believe philosophy helps to illustrate some of the doctrines. You know, you use philosophy to illustrate the Trinity, for example, or evil, for example. And in a very real sense, we cannot avoid philosophy. I mean, the most common, simple question that a normal Christian asks is, hey, if God knows everything, am I free? You know, something as basic as that. You cannot help. If you're going to answer that question at all, you will come against the nature of reality, nature of God's power, nature of it's all there, all the philosophy is right there. So, in a way, it's a forced marriage, you can't help it. Right? So I think philosophy done right would be able to illustrate it and to demonstrate to the believer that, hey, God is a God of the mind as well. And hey, you know, there are answers and they're good answers, and these answers make me a better person. Yeah, that's the best way. Second one, which is partially mentioned in the book, is that philosophy, I can't remember the name of the third author, has been used by many Christians as some kind of like, you know, what I call naval bombing, you know. It's like Hacksaw Ridge, sorry, I'm going off now. Like Hacksaw Ridge before the soldiers went up the cliff, right? The battleship had to bomb so you could say philosophy does some of this naval bombing. How? By breaking down some entrenched atheistic beliefs. For example, you know, the cosmological argument, the ontological argument. What's the other one? The teleological argument. All these are really big guns, you know. That's why I call them. And they could say sow a seed of faith in atheists, just like how the other way, right? You know, how Christians can, you know, you can sow seeds of doubt in Christians. I think this is the opposite one. When you bomb them using these very big philosophical arguments, Calum argument, for example, yeah, it's a way of God sowing, you know, seeds of faith into atheists.
So right? It can be a language to reach sort of
a
philosophy.
Tool come language, yeah.
To reach
to get closer, maybe not entirely reach, but you
like
know.
You said, to illustrate,
Yeah, to illustrate, yeah.
Okay. So now you presented kind of like a bit of a problem of maybe our beliefs leans towards a more Greek sort of way of thinking. Yeah. So what do we do about it then? It's like tam or tim or.
Well, I mean, I think the good news is that, and I think the good news is that, first of all, we are not in what you call, what's the phrase, sinning against the spirit category here. We're not in some kind of category whereby, oh no, you know, it's you better save the fellow. No, I mean, I think it really shows you the faithfulness of God, that in spite, I mean, you could take an Arminian and a Calvinist, and we all know both cannot be right, you know, okay, for example, but both can still serve God, both can still love their family, love the church, you know, be a blessing, blah, blah, blah. And I think that shows you that philosophy deals with important matters, but ultimately it's not important as love, it's not important as service. So maybe that is a way of God just holding us together.
Yeah.
So to ask your question, what do you do with that? I would just say, what I would do is any chance I get, right, I would just present my point of view. I would just say that, hey, you know, have you considered maybe God is not like that or something? And yeah, that's it. It's not a do or die situation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So would you say we should hold on to these kind of theologies loosely, as in it helps us to understand, but not to be dogmatic about it?
Yeah, I agree. I think there was something like in matters of something charity. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, okay. You should let love control it. I think, and here's the irony: even if I'm right, then assuming I'm right, and let's say you hold to those Greek categories, but I do violence upon you, and I'm blah, blah, blah. That's not love. That is wrong already. So God will say, hey, you might be right, but you're still wrong. So I think if love is there and kindness, openness, patience, then there is no downside. Even if you use a Greek and you use Greek and I use whatever, Shijakian or whatever it is, it doesn't matter, because the kingdom doesn't depend on that. It doesn't depend on whether you believe you're Arminian or Calvinist and so forth. Yeah. But again, that's my point of view. Yeah. There are some theologians who will believe that no. Unless you believe this, your salvation is in danger. So my point of view is no.
Yep.
The most important thing is usually the safest thing. Yep. The most important thing is do you believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and you believe Jesus is Lord and Savior. That's it.
So I think what I'm getting from this conversation, hearing from you, is that we can have a very open view, constantly learning. We can constantly be learning, maybe sometimes unlearning. It's like a diamond, right? There's many angles that we can see things from, and to be open to these ways of understanding God, because God is a mystery, and many of us try to understand from different ways. Sometimes it helps us at one point in time, but then we realize, I could be going down the wrong road, because the Bible has some evidences that
or it's not the wrong road, it's just that this road was good for this age, this concern, but later on, God will say, hey, why don't you try this other road?
Yeah.
In addition to the diamond analogy, again, I'm going to use a Clark Pinnock analogy of a buffet. He says theology and philosophy is like a buffet. You enjoy, you enjoy, you enjoy. Don't overeat. Don't be selfish.
Yeah.
Don't gorge yourself, and don't judge the food. Just enjoy, 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 and give thanks to God for it. And I thought that's very nice. Very Malaysian. Yeah.
Great. In a nutshell, what do you think is the importance and pitfalls of philosophy?
Okay.
For a Christian.
Importance and pitfalls. Okay, the importance, I'll recap, is that it gives a lot of scaffolding to faith, especially applying to those people who need the scaffolding. Now, there are some people who do not believe that they need philosophy, and really, I think that's fine. If they don't ever want to read anything, then that's fine. But there are some people who need it, and so philosophy helps to illuminate doctrines. Philosophy helps to push back skeptic arguments, and philosophy, because it's wedded to logic and truth, I think reflects the character of God. So that's the importance of philosophy. Pitfalls would be exactly the opposite. I think the pitfall doesn't come from philosophy itself. Pitfalls come from the heart. I may know the truth. The Bible says, but Satan is a liar. So philosophy, because it's a tool, it can be used in service of a lie. So, and again, that is what I think Paul was getting at. And Martin Luther also, he infamously, I think he said that reason was a whore or something like that. It doesn't mean that he rejects reason. It's just that he rejects reason in its capacity as a weapon against God. And I'm sure if Luther or Paul was alive, he would probably say that that's what people like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens are doing. They are very smart people, very intellectual, very bright, Oxford, Cambridge, but they use that thing, and they use all their mental energy to attack, to attack faith and to say that it's all nonsense and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the pitfall. I mean, you can be too smart for your own good. Right. Yeah.
Final one.
Sure.
What kind of advice would you give to someone who loves philosophy and God and is pursuing, loves reading philosophy?
Okay. I would quote the famous law of love that Jesus quote, something like love God, with all your heart, on your mind, also. So the first step would be love God first. That means, was it Luther or Augustine who said, love God and do anything you want in that order. So if you love God, and of course by loving God, I mean you need to serve, you need to be with people, you need to take care of needs, and that tempers that will temper and that will chasten, and that will build your appreciation of philosophy. Because in this sense, when you read philosophy, you read it in the whole stream of God's goodness. You're not just reading it to feel smart, or you're not reading it just to blast people down. You're reading it, as part of your worship, your devotion to build your mind, and so that kind of thing. And the other thing, which is more on, if you are the type that likes to argue, use that for the good of, for the glory of God. Gently respond to skeptical or unbelieving arguments. But before you do that, prepare yourself first and make sure that you are well read. I think, my supervisor said that for every sentence you write, for one paragraph that you write, you must have read 5 books, that kind of thing. So you need to be really, you have to discipline yourself to study. The biggest pitfall now that you mentioned it, and I've felt and I've fallen many times here, is that sometimes we are very proud of our argument, we think we can explain problem of evil so easy, and then all you need is one smart unbeliever and he just whacks you down, and then your faith becomes very fragile. So I think that if you love God, He will honor you and He will guide you to what to study and how to respond. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. That's about
Thank you.
it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome conversation.
All right.
So, what do you think? Heavy stuff? I grew up as a child memorizing by heart that God is unchanging and perfect. So realizing that this view is trying to fit God into Greek or pagan categories is at once shocking, but also freeing, and to be honest, very interesting and intriguing indeed. As a student of the Bible, I was greatly helped by this conversation to put all my formulas and presuppositions aside as I read and study Scripture to discover who God is as how He reveals Himself through Scripture alone. I found it intriguing, the conversation about dialectical or dialogical revelation, where truth is revealed in dialogue. I also learned and thought that while theology is important to help us grasp who God is, it is important not to try too hard to systematize God into little neat packages and using our reason to bend revelation so that it makes sense or conforms to our ideas or our feelings of what God should be like. I like an expression by C.S. Lewis in his book, The Chronicles of Narnia, to describe Aslan, the lion character that C.S. Lewis uses to portray God or Christ. In the book, there was a character that tells about the nature of Aslan, saying, quote, "He's wild, you know. He's not a tame lion," unquote. May we discover the wild God in Scripture.